Hello everyone, this is Paul Malutnak again, and we are going through the book of Revelation. Today we will be beginning chapter 13, probably be in two parts, but this would be part one. And we're going to continue on studying this wonderful book. Remember, Revelation is all about revealing Christ as the King. This is the process where he receives back the earth and the universe and everything that's in it. And so before we begin a reading in chapter 13, I wanted to talk a little bit about the strategy of Satan. We need to understand this so that none of these things that happen are a complete surprise. His strategy is to interfere, is to stop the plan of salvation of God, the plan to redeem mankind, sinful mankind. Satan has always wanted to do this from the very beginning. And so we look at things like Genesis chapter 6, when the fallen angels became demon hosts to human women and cohabitated with them, and that are called the daughters of men, and produced a strange product. Jude and Peter also discuss this, the fallen angels that extended beyond their domain that God had given them. And I guess Satan felt that this new breed maybe would be a breed that could not be redeemed, kind of like the demons are, the fallen angels are. There is no plan of salvation for the fallen angels. Maybe that's why God did flood the earth and flood the civilization to start basically all over again. In Exodus 1, we remember the slaughtering of offspring of Israel, trying to wipe out the Messianic line. In 2 Chronicles, we read about Jehoram slaughtered all his brothers except for one, preserved the line of Josiah down the line. The book of Esther is all about getting rid of the Israelites. And because through the Israel line, the Messiah will come. And they're still trying to do that today. Even though the Messiah is here, Israel still plays a large part in God's plan. Satan tried to destroy the Jewish people in Esther. Herod killed all the babies, the baby boys. Would have wanted to kill Jesus, but that didn't happen. God saved him and kept him. And Jesus was confronted by Satan in the temptation in the wilderness. Wanted him to jump off of a cliff and finish him. Jesus in Nazareth, when he taught in his hometown and let them know that he was God, they were incited, and they tried to push him off a cliff, and he passed through. God saved him once again. Peter opened his mouth, if you recall, when Jesus mentioned him dying, and Peter basically said, no, I won't allow you to do that, to give yourself up to the Romans and to the Jews. And Jesus called him Satan, because that would have kept the Messianic line from continuing. So all through history, we read about Satan opposed Christ in every avenue. And Jesus predicted, though, a steady stream of false messiahs would be coming, false teachers, but false messiahs, people that claim to be God. In the war with principalities and powers, we read that Satan is constantly doing what he can to try to eliminate the line of Christ. And there's a climax in Revelations 12, a war in heaven, where Michael prevailed and the demons were cast out of heaven. That hasn't happened yet, but that's in chapter 12. History of prototypes of Jesus, people trying to be the Messiah in one way or another. We think about Antiochus Epiphanes, 168 years before Christ. We think about the king of Syria, that was the pawn of Satan. He was trying to kill the Jews. He would not allow them to be circumcised or have a copy of the law. They would be killed. He came to the temple, and Antiochus came to the temple and sacrificed a pig on the altar, and basically tried to stop the temple worship. But Judas Maccabees, the hero of the Jews, overthrew him. But all down through history, we've seen people trying to rid this world of the Jewish people. And that's the reason why, is because, first of all, they carry the law. They have the messianic line, which Christ is going to come out of. And God's not done with them, as we'll see. People like Mussolini, Jim Jones, Stalin, Lenin, Mao Zedong, to name a few people. And so even today, we hear about the Jews under attack again and again. That Satan is behind all of that. So we need to understand that. And then let's get started with verse 1 of chapter 13 of the book of Revelation. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And of course, many have tried to demonstrate that pictorially, but we have to remember these are symbols. Satan is a spirit being. He is not a dragon that walks around on his legs, but they all represent something. So now older manuscripts have a pronoun he rather than I, like I saw this. And that means that it would really sound like, I think there are a few translations that say something like this: the dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. So a little bit different, meaning isn't a whole lot of change out of that. But John stressed 3 things about the beast. So now we see this beast. It was brought up once before. Now we see this beast, his conspiracy with the dragon, his success in deceiving the entire world, and he will have success in temporarily defeating God's saints. The implication is that the dragon summoned the beast out of the sea. Evidently, it was part of his plan to destroy the rest of the woman's offspring. Without exception, the imagery of the sea monster is used throughout the Old Testament to represent evil kingdoms who persecute God's people. The ancient world often associated evil with the sea and used the sea as a figure for the abyss. The figurative use of the sea seems best, since elsewhere John said that the beast came out of the abyss. So I think it is figurative. Now the beast had many of the same characteristics as the dragon. However, they also correspond to the features of the 4th kingdom that Daniel saw in his vision in Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel's vision, the 10 horns represented 10 rulers. Here the Antichrist has authority over 10 rulers. In Revelation 17, we'll see that. The first beast is a real person who will rule the world during the Great Tribulation. As Satan, the beast had 7 heads that apparently represented the remaining 7 rulers of nations. After 3 of them will disappear. There are a number of suggestions as to why diadems are placed on the horns rather than on the head, on the beast's heads. The most plausible is that his claim to authority rests on force, and that's what horns represent brute force. The blasphemous names reflect the beast's opposition to God. The beast is evidently Antichrist, who is the head of a future empire. Now, John receives more information about the identity of these heads and horns and diadems and so forth in chapter 17. So, the beast is a man. The horns signify power, strength. Kings are the human power that will assist him. The crowns are his dominion. The word great in there, it just is a multiplier of whatever it associates with. The sea is about evil. It's a figure for the abyss. Many attempts to draw the beast, as I've said before. It's very complicated, and not all the descriptors are necessarily physical reality. Blasphemy is opposition to God and Christ. The heads in Revelation 17 will find that the 7 heads are 7 mountains. The city of Rome is called the 7-hilled city. So there's something about Rome that we're going to look at. The 7 kings are referring to the past great world empires. And Daniel says the first 5 are Greece, Persia, Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, and Rome. The future one is also Rome, the new Rome. And so in chapter 17, we see 7 kings, 5 of them have fallen. 1 is, and then 1 is to be in the future. In Dan 2 and 7, it also mentions the 10-toed confederacy, which probably points to a European confederacy, these nations and kings and so forth. Ultimately, the revived Roman Empire will be overthrown by the beast, but it will be used first. Let's continue to read in verse 2. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it? The beast possessed qualities of 3 animals that we've read. Perhaps swiftness, agility, vigilance, craftiness, fierce cruelty, brutality, and strength and majesty are some of the adjectives. In Daniel, these animals represent the kingdoms that previously ruled the world. The kingdoms are Greece, Medo-Persia, Babylon. The 4th kingdom that Daniel described includes Antichrist's kingdom and seems to reflect his own personal qualities. The fact that the leopard of Greece, the bear of Medo-Persia, and the lion of old Babylon in Daniel chapter 7 are all seen in this beast. And it shows how all-inclusive the human things will be in his character. He sums up all the brilliancy sort of Greece and all the massive preponderance of power of Persia, all the absolute autocratic royal dominion of Babylon and the Gentiles have ever known. Antichrist will derive his power and position from Satan. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, it tells us this. Similarly, Jesus Christ receives these things from his Father. So you could see the parallel that they're trying to draw. The beast and Antichrist and Christ and the Father. If the beast's heads represent nations, in verse 3, seem to be saying that one of the nations under Satan's authority perished, but then it was revived again. So it seems like Rome might be a good answer to that. Now, the apparent resurrection of this nation, which might be Rome, will be so amazing to the world that many people will give their allegiance and their worship to Antichrist. In doing so, they will also submit to Satan, who is behind him. Antichrist's ability to revive the nation will make him appear invincible. The expression, "who is like the beast," in verse 4, seems to be a parody of Old Testament praises of God. In Dan 7, it talks about Babylon, the lion, fierce, majestic Persia, the bear, strong, powerful, Greece, the leopard, and the fourth beast, which is indescribable. It just says dreadful, terrifying, extremely strong, with large iron teeth, devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it's the one who had 10 horns. That's in Daniel 7. That's Rome, I believe. So that parallels this in Daniel 2. The image of the statue, if you remember, where the final form, Rome again, was iron, and it had 10 toes, which are parallel here to the 10 horns in this comparative image. Now, we go to Revelation 13 again, and we'll put that in, weave that in. Here we see, again, those same animals which were common to that part of the world, and I think that's why they're probably used. The leopard, the bear, the lion. Notice that they're all embodied in one beast. All of those characteristics, the power of Babylon, its greatness, strength, and stability, the fierceness of Persia, etc. So when they go to say, "who is like the beast," in Exodus 15:11, it says, "Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders," as a question. And so there you see that parallel coming up. Rome will be Antichrist's dominion. Babylon is always represented a false system of religion, and that's in chapter 17. We see this system, Babylon, riding on the beast. So these are all connected. This chart here is an interesting one. This was put together by Charles Swindoll, where you can compare the statue of Daniel 2, the beast of Daniel 7, its meaning, and then the beast of Revelation 13. And so I show this just to kind of show that you really have to go back into Daniel and see and get some more information that might help us to best define Revelation 13, in particular, that beast. And now, who is the beast? Well, it talks about the eyes, which are the intellect. So here's some characteristics. The mouth that speaks great things. So he is going to be an orator. He'll be high intellect. He'll be an orator. He'll be a master politician from Daniel 11. He'll be a commercial wizard or an economic community wizard in Daniel 8. It says he worships the God of forces in Daniel 7, which probably means he'll be a military genius. In 2 Thessalonians 2, as I mentioned earlier, a man of sin, perdition, exalts himself, religious, charismatic, okay? And so we have here an intellectual genius, an orator, a person that could speak very fluently, a politician, business savvy, military mastermind, and religious leader. And so Daniel also said he'll understand dark sentences, which means he will probably represent being a medium, someone who can speak to another world or speak to the dead. And he can make direct contact with the pit, the mighty power from Satan and evil, and he is a monster, but he is a man. Now, Daniel 11:36 says, "And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. He shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper until the indignation is accomplished. For what is decreed shall be done." And so we come across also this idea of this wound, this fatal wound to the head of this beast. Now, I'd like to give you three possibilities. The first, as we sort of mentioned, is that if it is a nation, if we're talking about a nation that probably was one of those heads that was fatally wounded, it could be Rome, because Rome will fall. We know that. Rome will fall, but will be resurrected. And Satan will work out of Rome. And so I think it's one way of looking at it is it's the nation that falls. Another one is that the beast itself dies and was resurrected by Satan. However, that's kind of weak because he has never been given the power to bring life out of death, but from God. Besides, if only one head was wounded, and this was a real wound to kill him, why would he die with just one head wounded? But that's an option. That, in fact, most people probably think that's what happened. He died and then he was resurrected. The third option, part A of the third option, if you will, is that the beast faked his death. It was a deception, because that's what Satan is. He's a deceiver, and appeared to be resurrected, but really wasn't. Now, the third version, the second option from that is that he did die, but the demonic double from the pit took his place as false prophet convinced the world that he was real and that was him, or made a statue to speak as if it was the beast. So we have these three main ideas there, and I can't be dogmatic about any one of them. I will lean towards the first one about the nation dying. Let's look at verse 5. "And the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and nation, language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it," earth dwellers, "everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain." That's beautiful, isn't it? Somewhere in the world, there may be a child alive today whose name someday will be Antichrist. He could even be an adult by now. This just depends on the imminency of this tribulation. This is not a Hollywood fantasy. It's not a religious illusion. It's not a dream. It's not the figment of an imagination. This is not some theologian's hallucination. This is a divine promise. This is going to happen in this world. Antichrist will come. There will be a man who will be Satan's false Christ, who will deceive the world, pretending to be the world's Messiah, the world's deliverer, the world's savior, the king, and even pretending to be the God of this world. The whole world will accept him. And I say that in generalities. The very high majority of people will accept him. They will believe this. The whole world will buy the satanic ruse and fall victim to his power. He's Satan's guy, and his agenda is to destroy the nation Israel so that they cannot be saved, so they cannot have a kingdom. His desire is to prevent their salvation and prevent the kingdom. He will fight against all who believe in that day and massacre them all over the world. He will attempt to take over the world on behalf of Satan. And then when Christ returns, attempt to engage him in battle, which will defeat Christ and allow him the representation of Satan to reign supreme. Now that's his hope, but that's not going to happen. In verse 2, it talks about, and the dragon gave to him his power and throne and great authority. The weird and wild Messiah of the devil somehow called him, has great power. And that's talking about sheer force. He really can't be halted. God steps back because right now God has restraint on this world. He restrains sin, doesn't keep it from happening, but he keeps it from going too far. But God's going to step back now and allow sin to run amok, allow Satan to run amok, allow the demons to run amok. And there's no human element to stop him. You say, well, what about the holy angels? Well, they're sort of called off. The Lord himself lets them run their gamut. Not only do the demons have force, but throne. That's regal dominion. They're absolutely in charge. They're going to be in charge. It's not just a rebel army or a coup. These powerful demon spirits who have infested the world with immense power, and they wield it from a kingly dominion. And then he says, and great authority. That is, they have the right to act. They have freedom to act, and they have no accountability. They have no restraint, no one stopping them from doing anything that they want to do. It's not like now. It's going to be during that time period that Paul describes in Thessalonians chapter 2, when the one who hinders, who restrains, steps back, and all restraint is gone. Remember, all of the demons of the universe are on the earth now for the first time in human history. Out of the pit they've come, freed from their bindings at the Euphrates River. The 200 million and the ones in heaven cast down to the earth are now in the earth. They're all here and they're all free to act, and God restrains absolutely nothing. At the same time, they're creating their fury and harming people and killing people. The first of them come out of the pit, and they can only harm people. The people want to die. And then the next wave of them kill people. And at the same time, God is wreaking havoc by pouring out the fury of a collapsing universe on the heads of those in the world. This is all God's plan. This idea of that God had said that he was going to judge the world. And now it happens, and Satan is the instrument that's doing that. Satan hates God, but God's given him restraint because God is going to allow this judgment to happen. The Holocaust, let's call it, is unimaginable. Now, how does the beast possibly rise to this kind of power? Well, some people always ask this legitimate question: what is the circumstance that allows this man to rise up? How does he rise to the place of power? To be reminded there's certain conditions to make this happen. And people want a man. They're looking for a leader. A dictator never thrusts his rule upon the people from the top down without some provocation. And inevitably, a man rises to this kind of rule because of chaos. When the chaos gets so bad and there are no answers and no solutions, then that perfect situation arises for leadership to develop. That's true in any kind of leadership. Leaders are born out of crises. Leaders rise in the middle of unsolvable problems. Leaders come to the top when there aren't any solutions. It is in the frightening and horrible chaos of this world that this man is going to rise, empowered by Satan, and he's going to seize authority in the midst of the emergency. So successful will this coup be that men will be thrilled by his masterly genius and accept the principle that only an imperial form of government will be able to give that lasting peace. They'll get rid of democracy. They'll throw aside their freedoms just for peace. This man will come on the scene at the beginning of the tribulation, and he will bring peace, which tells us before that happens, it's going to be utter worldwide chaos that allows him to bring this and say he's going to bring peace. This would mean that when the church is taken out of the world, it's most likely to be in time of great chaos. Now, the notable abilities of this beast are blasphemy against God and deception of people. These activities also marked Antiochus Epiphanes, the prototype of Antichrist, as I mentioned earlier. God will give authority to the beast to act as he will during the Great Tribulation, the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. He will blaspheme God by claiming to be God. This is evidently what he'll do throughout the Great Tribulation, just at one point in it. He will speak against God and God's dwelling place, his heavenly tabernacle. The phrase, those who dwell in heaven, define the tabernacle in terms of its inhabitants, namely God and his holy angels. Apparently, the beast will share the dragon's antagonism to God and the angels for having cast the dragon out of heaven. The phrase, he opened his mouth, often indicates the beginning of a prolonged discourse. He will wage war against believers and overcome them, and he will become a worldwide dictator. No other ruler has ever been able to rule the entire world. Unbelievers around the world will only serve Antichrist, but also they will worship him. But the book of the life of the Lamb contains the names of God's elect. Most, if not all, true believers will refrain from worshiping Antichrist. The long and unusual description of unbelievers in this verse has the effect of assuring believers during this time that they are indeed secure. The world will be duped. Daniel 9 talks about the covenant with the world for peace, that he will break this contract and he'll decimate the temple. There will be a strong delusion. In 2 Thessalonians, I mentioned many times in this video, therefore God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe in what is false, in order that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Even Israel will believe him, but believers will not fall, because their names are written in the book of life before the foundation of the world. The beast will be worshipped. And in 2 Thessalonians, in chapter 2, verse 10, it says, and with all the wicked deception for those who are perishing because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. What an important scripture. Why can't they believe? Why are they deceived? Because they refused to love the truth. let's look at verse 9. If anyone has an ear, he says, let him hear. If anyone has to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he will be slain. This here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Let me read it again in the Message translation. It says, are you listening to this? They've made their bed. Now they must lie in it. Anyone marked for prison goes straight to prison. Anyone pulling a sword goes down by the sword. Meanwhile, God's holy people passionately and faithfully stand their ground. God and John called the readers of this book to pay attention, particularly those living at the time in the future that they should do so. Note that John made no reference to the churches, as in similar exhortations in chapters 2 and 3. We hear nothing of the church. This supports the fact that Christians, the church, will not be present on the earth at this time. It is what follows that the verse announces, not what has preceded. God promised the saints that those he has destined for captivity will eventually end up as captives. Those who kill others will die. The assurance that God will execute justice should encourage the saints to persevere steadfastly and to trust God during this period of intense persecution and martyrdom. The whole verse is an encouragement for believers to submit to the sovereignty of God, realizing that he has permitted Antichrist activity, but that they are secure. It is also an assurance of divine retribution and urges them to persevere faithfully. He says that to us today. He said, anything that happens, he's got control. We are to be faithful and trust God and persevere throughout any of the storms of our lives. The saints keep the faith. God reminds us of his faithfulness, and he keeps the saints from the beginning. Their names were in the book of life. Thank you for watching this part 1 of Revelation chapter 13. And please look for the next video, which will be part 2 of Revelation 13. And we will then finish this book, beautiful and wonderful book of the Bible. And thank you very much, and God bless.